Hello?
SJ Enterprises, I'm going to guess, and I'm assuming I'm going to be right, that stands for Stanley Jordan.
Yes.
My brother, giving you a big hug and a high five.
Oh,
And
so good to hear your voice again.
yeah, man. Yeah, you as well. And just been such a pleasure to have you in the studio that time with us, playing our Bosendorfer piano and
Oh,
your
yeah.
guitar at the same time. Only time that's probably ever happened. And yeah, and then over at the Blue Note and on the phone and stuff. So yeah, man, just the warmest regards. Grateful to have you back. A gigantic aloha and mahalo as Stanley returns to the show for, he's got Thursday at the Max McCoy Studio Theater, Friday Honoka'a People's Theater, Saturday the Porter Pavilion on Kauai. And do you still remember that time when you were here at our Atherton studio playing our Bosendorfer piano and your guitar? You do this so much, it's all a blur.
Oh, of course I remember it.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, and that piano was amazing too.
Thank you.
Wow.
That's a special one. We're lucky to have that and to have had a cat like yourself. I still remember looking at that going, what the hell is he doing? So first,
Is there a story behind the piano?
there probably is, and I should get myself equipped on that. I'm sure it was a donation or a contribution or something led to it. Next time you're in town, I promise I'll know more about the origin story, if you will, of our Bosendorfer. But for you, you're coming in. Say again?
No, I'm just going to say I love piano stories. You know, that's kind of a whole genre. Like, I don't know if you know, but there was this legendary piano at Carnegie Hall. And, Steinway was right down the street, and they had a contract with Carnegie Hall. Oh. And every 3 years, they were supposed to change the piano. But after 3 years, Carnegie Hall said, we want to keep it another 3 years. Horowitz and all these people, they all say, you've got to keep this piano. It's the best. So Steinway let him keep it. And then 3 years later, they said, all right, that's it. We're taking the piano back. And Carnegie Hall was like, oh, no, you're not. Went into a kind of a dispute from what I heard.
Wow.
And they never really resolved it. And it just sort of ended up down in the basement and sat there for a couple of years. And then the studio in Queens basically bought it at an auction. So I know where that piano is.
What a great story that is. And that thing's still not being used? It's still just...
It's amazing. It's an amazing... Well, it's used in the studio now.
Okay. All right. So they've kind of turned it into another... given it a new life, so to speak.
Yeah.
And these are unusual things for you. Talking about a new life, last time I saw you, it was a few years back at the Blue Note. You did the Stanley Plays Jimmy show, Jimmy as in Jimi Hendrix. It was really incredible. These shows, though, talk about a whole different kind of thing. I understand. Maybe I have it wrong, but I thought I recall these are going to be really special. They're going to be solo shows.
Yeah, so I'm back to my roots in a way, and I mean, for a while, much too long, I haven't been playing in Hawaii that much. And so the fact that I'm coming back and bringing my solo again, I think is really special. And I love doing the other things, the jazz trio and the Hendrix tribute, and there's some other projects I've got going. But I think that the solo is, I don't know, certainly from my heart, it's just so close to my heart because I get a chance to feel really close to the people. And there's a level of intimacy that can't be had any other way. I just recently did my first tour of Australia, by the way.
Oh, wow.
And that was all solo. And I said, since it's my first time there, I want to start with the solo because that is where I think people can really hear the soul of my music.
Oh, totally. First time I saw you was at Sculler's Jazz Club, Boston. The late, great Freddie Taylor had booked you there,
Wow.
and that was a solo one. I was like leaning against the back wall on one of those high stools, just watching you from not that far away. And yes, I agree with what you said. When people see you solo, it's the only thing that I hope isn't missing. Is there going to be a piano nearby so that you can demonstrate that remarkable bit, or no?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be using pianos all the time. On the Australia tour, we also had pianos, except for there was one time where it was like this electronic piano and the quality wasn't really that good. I got halfway through a song and I was like, you know what? I just can't. finish the song. It's just the piano's just not happening. No, I don't mean to pull a Keith Jarrett on you guys.
Yeah, no.
I'm sorry, that's it. Enough of this piano.
It's funny. I can just imagine. Well, that's a memory too for those who get to see it. And dialing in on the before we get into more of the career stuff, on the last couple of years, do you have, when you think about the experiences of the pandemic, we've had all kinds of. We basically started doing the show, talking to people around the world remotely because all the concerts stopped, and so we'd hear all kinds of wild stories about people's experiences. Sometimes they were frightening. Sometimes a professional experience. They're on tour, it stops because of something. I mean, right back when it all started, or some people were actually on cruises when it started. And then during it, obviously, it's been 2 years. So there's been experiences, moving episodes, perhaps being touched by some of the losses, or just anything that you think, when, now that I've given you just a moment to sort of let it percolate in your head, if you were to think, you know, there's people listening, how did this guy fare during the pandemic? Was there any sketchy moments for him? Anything you can share?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, of all places to be at the beginning of the pandemic, I happened to be in China.
Wow.
And in fact, it was New Year's Eve of 2020. And my band played New Year's Eve in Shanghai at the Blue Note. And after that, we went to Beijing, and I remember the tour manager saying, "Be careful, there's a really bad virus going on around here." And we took the train to Beijing, and we didn't know the system, so we got on the wrong end of the train, and we had to walk through the whole train. So we were less than 6 feet from every single person on the train. And I was pretty sick. I couldn't get a test at the time, but for about a month and a half,
oh my God,
I was really sick. And I actually, in a way, the lockdown was good for me because my health actually got better once I got off the road and, you know, got out of the whole scene. I needed to anyway.
Wow. So you had been there doing some gigs right when it kicked in, then, or right before it kicked in, like a couple months before it really got wide exposure. And then you came back. Where were you in for the bulk of the time?
So then for the rest of January, I went to a few other COVID hotspots. Let's see, Northern California, Southern California, Florida, New York, all those places.
You were just working it, taking a lot of chances.
2020. So finally, by the end of January, I was just done. And I actually did some teaching at this amazing, legendary place in the Bay Area, the Rika Center for Human Enhancement. It's difficult to describe, but it's just look it up. It's just hard to explain.
Okay.
But I basically taught there full time for the whole month of February. And that's when I started to get off the road, really. And the wonderful thing about it, too, was I started to give materials to some of my students, and I noticed I was giving the same materials to different people. So I just decided, well, I'll just post it online, and then I'll give you a link. And then after doing that a while, I realized, hey, I'm building an educational website, actually. So I just continued. I got a lot of stuff put in place. My site, it's Integral Arts Academy.
Yep.
And it's a kind of a child site inside of StanleyJordan.com. And I've got a lot of stuff up there right now. I've got about almost 600,000 pages of guitar chords. I've got a whole library of harmony using a system that I call the chromatic system that I rather immodestly claim is the harmonic system of the 21st century, or at least should be. And there's just a lot of material in there. So I wouldn't have done it if it weren't for the time out.
Right. And then you're sharing and making that stuff available. I mean, there's how many people who are fans and or musicians who appreciate your work now get a little bit more insight into some of that stuff and the ability to learn more about, you know, your shared chosen instrument kind of through them. That's really hip. You know, another thing about the pandemic too, probably, in addition to being able to start new creative ventures like that, which then continue, like the Integral Arts Academy. Another interesting thing was to be able to, like, I found myself going back in time and listening to like older music that maybe I had not taken the time to do. Like one example was YouTube. Kind of, I'll give them the credit. They in their algorithm suggested to me this really long Led Zeppelin live soundboard board track that had never been officially released. And so it was like a 20-minute, 30-minute version, no quarter or something. And I found it really, really rewarding. And then I started finding more of that stuff. But one of the things recently I did online that relates to you is a very interesting experience when you talk about that development of your sound and what makes it so special. You did this thing, and I've never asked you about this, and I'm hoping you can tell us the story of how it even came to be. You were on The Tonight Show many years ago, the late, great Robert Palmer. The two of you sitting there, what a special version of Nature Boy. Explain that whole thing to us, and because that is not just some pop. You think of Robert Palmer, this pop cat, this soulful New Orleans kind of boogie cat, but this is a whole different kind of thing that you guys did together.
Yeah, he had seen me somewhere, I forget where, and wanted to do, I think he saw me do some TV show and requested that we do that song together. And it was really interesting. We hadn't met before, but there was one thing that he said that really kind of stuck out in my mind. So we're backstage, and I had done the Tonight Show before, but this was his first time. And he said, I've always kind of thought of myself as sort of the, sort of counterculture rebel, I'm not part of the establishment, but here tonight, I'm on the Tonight Show. So that means that I'm the establishment now. And I just thought that was really cool, and I think he was a little older than me, but because of the fact that I had more of a jazz approach, shows like that were a little bit more open to me, whereas for him coming from the rock side, and of course doing Nature Boy, that was different for him.
Big time. Right. That's my point, is when I bring it up, I'm sure for people, naturally and understandably, the name Robert Palmer will conjure up Addicted to Love or, any of those other tracks, whether, from Power Station or from his earlier career, Sneakin' Sally Through the Alley. But at the same time, when you watch that thing with you guys, that's like a sensitive, like it could be in a Blue Note, just the two of you, real quiet kind of setting, and it's very interpretive and very jazz. So you're right. He had to really step out of his thing to do what he did with you.
Yeah, and I really should have followed up more. He wanted to go in the studio and do some recording in that vein, and I was up for it, but we just never put our schedules together. So,
wow, what an incredible! But it's part of your legacy. Folks should look that one up. I'll put it in the post for your thing, actually, because it's just an example of. And you talk about the diversity. I guess a great way to showcase your diversity is. There's another cat I've never asked you about, and I hadn't even realized that you had a huge hit with him. Country legend Kenny Rogers. I've never seen him. I have ate at his restaurant some tasty breakfasts there in Vegas, but you recorded Morning Desire with him. He's a guy I've never remember anyone telling a story about this guy. So anything about how that came together, maybe meeting him, and then maybe he even sang The Gambler for you or something. I'm not sure, but when you did Morning Desire, anything that comes up.
Well, he had seen me on the Johnny Carson show.
Oh, this
and
connects.
He had written this song, and he was going to put it on the album. And George Martin, the Beatles producer, was the producer of this album. And the issue that he had was that this song, he thought maybe it sounded a little too much like Bruce Springsteen, I'm on Fire.
Okay.
And he didn't want people to think that it was, just a cop of that.
Right.
And so then he saw me and he thought, that's it. That's what's going to make this song different. And so they contacted us, and of course, I'd love to work with Kenny Rogers. I've always loved his music, and so we did the song, and I loved working with him, and I really loved just the surprise pleasure of working with George Martin as well.
Right.
And I really kind of understood what a good producer does, because there's so many, there's different styles of producing. There's more technical, there's more administrative producers, there's more arranging oriented. He was kind of in the middle of all three, but there was another element that was more just sort of humanistic. Like, he had a way of bringing out the best in people, just on a human level, just making you really, like, at one point we were in the studio and he was literally like pulling, like with his hands, just pulling, like give me that Stanley stuff. I want more of that Stanley stuff. And I was like, wow, okay. And it's like the more it sounded like me, the more he liked it. And that was so awesome, because so often you go in the studio and they already have a, standardized thing that they want you to do, And basically what he said was, pretend this is your album. And what would you play if this was your album? And I think that the solo I did, for me, I think it stands up to any of the stuff on my albums. It's on YouTube, but whoever put it, they cut off my solo at the end, so you only hear a little bit of it. But if you hear the whole track, I enjoy hearing that. And basically, the story of the song is that he doesn't want to go to work. He just wants to stay with his lover and listen to the rain, And so the way I interpreted that is that I was the rain.
Oh, wow.
So when you hear the solo, then you kind of understand that's what I was thinking, especially the end of the solo. I think that really comes across. And just one other thing I'll mention about that. So there was already another guitar on the track, and they weren't 100% sure if they wanted to use it or not. It was just kind of a reference rhythm guitar part. Mm-hmm. But I really liked it, and I really wanted them to keep that guitar. So I wanted to make sure that whatever I did was compatible with the guitar. So I said to George Martin, if you don't mind, I'd like to take some time and sort of study that part and figure out how to really mesh with it. He said, no problem. And so I sat down and I put on my sort of academic composer hat, and I actually wrote out the main riff, and I composed a counterpart to that. And, it took a little while, but he said, take as much time as you need, no problem. And they had a basketball court in the back of the studio. So I heard him just shooting the hoops in the back.
Where did you record?
It was a studio in LA, just a little sort of boutique studio. And it's the only time I've ever recorded there. But just the sound of that basketball hitting the ground let me know that all was well and that I could do whatever I needed to do. So I have this memory of hearing George Martin's basketball,
and that's something
in the background.
You don't hear about that from anybody. And was there times that Kenny Rogers and George Martin and yourself were all in the studio, or no?
Well, Kenny picked me up from the hotel and he brought me there. Okay. And he had some other things to do, so he stayed for a little while and then he left. He had the most amazing car. I think it was that whatever company it was, they decided that they were going to give him their super high tech, 21st century version of their idea of a car. So like when he picked me up, I was looking around, nowadays they've got the Tesla and all this kind of stuff. But the first time I had that kind of experience in a car was when Kenny Rogers picked me up from the hotel. And that was like in the 80s.
Yeah, right. Back
that was like 86.
Right.
But that song did really well. It was the #1 country song of 1986. And I think it goes to show that the old tried and true formula of getting the best work out of musicians on a human level. When the musicians are feeling good and able to really do what they do best, you get the best music, and then the public hears it and they like it. It's like, duh, that's how it should work.
And you got a guy
so it's nice when it works as it should.
And you got a guy like George Martin. I mean, talk about having expertise and his experience, a diverse one too, because we have the America guys are on the show sometimes, Jerry Beckley, and they've worked with him. I mean, so you think about George has been, from the Beatles to so many other people. And was Kenny a cat that you ever kept any relationship with, or are these often, whenever the case is that you get to work with someone like that, do they kind of come in and out of your life with just a quick kind of blip?
We didn't really keep in touch. I mean, I think I'd run into him once or twice at different things, like, Grammys and stuff like that. But that was the only time we got a chance to really kind of hang out at all. Okay. And he never... He was a really nice guy. Really nice.
He seems
really
like
sweet
it.
Guy.
He seems like it. You ever eat at his restaurants?
I have not.
Okay. And he didn't sing anything, just sing anything for you, huh? Off the cuff, did he?
No.
He's got that voice, kind of like you when you touch the strings. And that's one of the things. A long time ago, when you were young, you think about things that shape people. and help people to end up being the kind of cats that they are. And when you were really, really young, and you would know better than me if this was a critical moment in your life or not, because you've done so many things since then. So perhaps it changes through your life, how important it was when you got together. It was Quincy Jones. He was at the Reno International Jazz Festival. And can you share that remarkable story? And did you ever get to cross paths with him again, I guess, after the story? That would be the second question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so when we met, it wasn't at the Reno Festival.
Oh, okay.
It was, so what they did was, so I grew up in Palo Alto, California.
Okay.
And they put together a band, like a high school all-star jazz band from around Santa Clara County.
Okay.
And Bud Dimmick, who was kind of locally famous, really talented guitarist and teacher, he was the one who auditioned me. And so he heard me and he said, oh, of course, we definitely want you in the band. So what the band did is we did a concert with Quincy Jones. And also Jerome Richardson was there as well performing. And so obviously, well, the concert was in San Jose, so obviously we did that song, Do You Know the Way to San Jose? You know? And I believe we did Killer Joe. Gotta think back on the repertory, but I did get a chance to talk to Quincy a little bit, and he was very encouraging. And it was sort of like he sort of just welcomed me. He's like, well, I know I'm going to see you again. You know, I love your talent and your playing and stuff. So that was really sweet. And just what a legend, you know. I mean, you know, and someone who has done so much and all those genres of music that he's crossed. He went and studied with Nadia Boulanger and did like something like 200 recording sessions while he was over there in Paris. And just one little chapter of his life, you know. And just no ego, just really all about the music, you know. And I remember one time we were at the Grammys, and I was just sitting there. I think I was about to go on because I was presenting an award. And I was just sitting there backstage waiting, and I was just, you know, humming intervals, you know, bum, 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 or whatever, you know, just I'm always kind of singing stuff to myself. My mom told me that people used to think that I was retarded. That was the word they used back then. Is your son retarded? Because I was always making weird noises and stuff. Right. So anyway, he made a comment about that. And said, you know, you remind me of myself, just always singing, trying out different intervals. And, you know, he said, if you're not careful, you could lose your marriage doing that.
Oh, that's fun.
I don't know. Maybe I'm telling too much. But.
No, that's a great, and these are great stories that help people to understand some of this very special, you know, reasons why these shows are unique, and to see Stanley solo. And a final note on that one, I guess it wouldn't be right to have asked, did you ever get to run into Michael Jackson through your life? When I think of Quincy, I think of him.
No, I've never met Michael. I did when I did my Flying Home album. Significant part of it was recorded in Tito Jackson's studio, so I got a chance to talk to him because we were there for like a week or two.
Wow!
And at one point, we were doing our session, and you know, this young woman came in, and Tito goes, yeah, I'd like you to meet my sister Janet. Oh, hi, Tito's sister Janet. So we're just sitting here talking, and after it took me 10 minutes to realize, hey, wait a minute, this is Janet Jackson I'm talking to right now. But she was just so sweet and unaffected, and she was really excited to hear the guitar stuff that we were working on, and she said, you know, I've always wanted to learn guitar. And I said, well, I can give you guitar lessons. So I guess I still Janet, if you're out there, you can still get your guitar lesson from me.
Hopefully she hears this. That'd be great to put the two of you together. And what a great sense of humor and good energy you've got, Stanley. He's coming for 3 solo shows. It's going to be Thursday at the Max McCoy Studio Theater, Friday, Honoka'a People's Theater, Saturday, Porter Pavilion on Kauai. And he also shares his great spirit in concert. And if you're lucky, he might share an amazing story or two with you when he's not playing the piano and guitar at the same time. I hope you had fun today, getting to just go over some stuff and to just kick back and relax again. It's always a great pleasure. Stanley Jordan.
Thank you so much, Dave. And one thing that we are talking about doing because of the COVID thing, and I haven't been doing the traditional meet and greets like I normally have done.
Sure.
I know things are kind of loosening up a little bit, but in lieu of meet and greets, what I started doing is doing Q&A from the stage.
Oh, wow.
And they've gone so well that I've just sort of continued it. Like when I did my tour in Australia, every single one of the shows, we did a little brief Q&A at the end, and we talk about so many interesting things. So hopefully, if we can work this out, we'll arrange that for these shows in Hawaii as well.
Oh, and there you go. So people can get their own stories out of you, hopefully, with the things they were most interested in. Those are great. That sounds cool, brother. I'm giving you, because these are all on other islands, obviously, than Oahu. I'll give you a virtual hug, a high five, and be crossing my fingers, too, that these go great and that you're safe and healthy, and can't wait till you make it back into Honolulu again. We'll get you in the studio. We'll kick back some more and share some more stories from your remarkable life.
That sounds great. Thank you. And so great talking with you today.
You too. Aloha, Stanley. Stay safe, brother.
Aloha.